Today I'd like to share some, persuade you to go towards buying a mutt. All right, so Labrador Retrievers, Golden Retrievers, German Shepherds, and Bulldogs. Typically, the dog show winners, the pure breeds, the dogs that most people will usually run to when they're considering buying a dog. So most people would consider these dogs the superior dogs. But further research showed me that that's absolutely incorrect. And that actually, when you consider buying a dog, it's better to adopt a mutt. Because I'm about to tell you why. So since the domestication of all dogs, the agreement was made, I'll give you my scraps, and you protect me around the fire. And this was made, this changed the color in their skin, resulting in lower of aggression in these dogs. And of course, the diversity came when tribes came together and decided to trade their dogs, or more commonly and more influential, the actual trading companies in the 1800s. This is also a very popular thing within the higher class people. So why do we think of these as purebreds? Why do we think of these as purebreds, as we talk of nature, as if they've been around for 100 years and it just is the way it is? That's absolutely incorrect, and we made them purebreds. The history behind that is 100 years ago, selective breeding was very popular among the rich and the famous, because a lot of people that had that power would make a dog and show how unique it was. The more unique it was, the higher in status you were. It was just the perfect accessory, is the way I like to put it. Very sick and twisted, if you ask me. They would also use what was called the kennel clubs in the UK and the American kennel clubs to, persuade the society to consider them pure breeds. And that title alone made them what they are today, all the way resulting in 100 years later. About 90% of the breeds that we all know today were made around this time. This is around 1880 or so. And that's not the worst thing that we did to these dogs, purebreds I'm referring to. The worst thing we did was keep them this way. And I mean that as in, we kept them from mating with any other dogs because we wanted them to keep that prestigious look, the price that they are, and the way they make you look. So we kept them from breeding with other dogs. And a lot of situations, this is, think about that. Think about how small that genetic pool just got. People who just made this dog, and now it's so unique, right? And now maybe a couple of people copy that dog. Let's say we have a dozen. Now those dogs mate with each other. It's what's called the population bottleneck or the genetic bottleneck. Now we force them together to make them breed with each other so we can try to make a population on its own. This causes them the genetic constructs that are already made to start hitting where they've already hit before. And in more extreme situations, they were forced to mate with their cousins, siblings, and parents, just so they can keep the look that we desire so much. So in other words, when you think of purebred, you should think of inbred, and we did that. So with the bottleneck effect that we've caused, this causes a lot of physical disabilities and diseases and such to become way more popular. As you know, inbreds usually turn out to have that Hollywood look. I know we've all seen The Hills Have Eyes. The scientists label that these diseases are more inevitable than anything, the more that we continue to keep what we call purebreds. A couple examples of this is 60% of Bernese Mountain Dogs and 50% of Golden Retrievers die from cancer. That's a grossly number. Most Great Danes are too large for their hearts to support their whole body. And one third of King Charles Spaniels' heads are too small for their brain, resulting in a constant, unbearable headache. German Shepherds were originally bred to be 55 to 65 pounds. Now they're about 90 to 100 on average, resulting in one of the more famous breed for having joint pains and hip dysplasia. And also, I don't know if anybody's bought one out here. I personally think they look like goblins. And this brings me to the biggest example of why pure breeding is a terrible idea, the bulldog. I know we all know what bulldogs look like, and they win a lot of dog shows. They're very popular and desired. However, these dogs only have a life expectancy of around 6 years. Their faces are so smushed that all of them have breathing problems constantly, and about 90% of them have hip dysplasia. And the worst part is that they actually wouldn't continue to be bulldogs if it wasn't for us stepping in. They can't even reproduce without our help. Their heads are too large to be given birth naturally. We actually have to C-section every one. And also, most of them are too unhealthy to actually perform sex by themselves. Usually it's through science that we've created. And most of these problems, all these problems, can be fixed by just letting the dogs mate with whatever they want to mate with. Really referring back to the natural way of things are. So the way that, just a quick rundown of the way genetics work is, whenever you were born, you have two pairs of genetic or recessive genes from your parents. The way that works is, if you have one recessive gene, it usually can be beat out. It can only really take hold if there are two recessive genes. But if there are dominant genes, you can have two, you can have one, but if the one will always beat out. Thinking about that math, the longer that we start trying to fix it, and scientists believe immediately these breeds will start turning around, will start fixing themselves, start fixing what we did. People usually see dogs at the pound and see the way the conditions they usually come in and associate them with being unhealthy. What people fail to realize is that purebreds are pampered. They're taken care of. As soon as they're in the womb. They're given special treatment. As soon as they're out, they get to spend time with their families during those developmental stages, and usually they're sold for thousands of dollars. Sold for thousands of dollars, and that's because it makes up for all the pampering that they received. On the other hand, mutts are usually born through accident or just somebody through accident, as in somebody wasn't monitoring their dog at that time of the year, and they're usually given away as soon as they're born and not taken care of, or more commonly, as we see in Okinawa, on the streets in that thick out there. And usually those dogs are given away or forced to fight for survival, resulting in higher aggression and obviously diseases that come with skin diseases from being out in the sun all day or just malnourishment. These dogs are still very healthy. You ask any veterinarian, and I guarantee every single one will say that these dogs are still healthier than pure breeds. All you need to do is give them the love that they deserve. Usually, these dogs are still, all dogs are closely related to wolves. And it doesn't take long for them just to revert back to their wild tendencies really fast. But of course, all it takes is that unspoken pact to domesticate them again. They actually did a study on wolves, on foxes, and it only took 3 generations for them to start looking like dogs for just petting and feeding them human food. Just 3 generations. Most people choose pure breeds because of the predictability. Obviously, all you do is a little YouTube research and understand how they're going to look, what they're going to act like, and how they'll fit in your family. This is usually comforted by the buyers from the industries that sell them by doing DNA tests that usually tell them, no, they're good for diseases, there's not going to be anything going wrong with them. And a lot of associations will back them up on that. However, you can actually run your own DNA test on any given dog. There are a couple easy to Google websites where all you take is a little cotton swab with saliva, and 2 weeks later, they'll actually break down absolutely everything that a dog's made up of, so you can predict how they're going to act or what health issues they might have, all the way down to percentage. You'll say something like 20% poodle, 5% chihuahua, 6% Great Dane. It's very accurate, as well as they'll tell you what diseases, what recessive genes they've even inherited. Mutts are homeless not to no fault of their own. All they really need is our love. Most dogs, they're not like purebreds who were designed to do specific things that we designed them to do 100 years ago. So they weren't bred to hunt, they weren't bred to fish, they weren't bred to do sports or to seek people. And if you were to buy a purebred, I understand that a lot of people love them for these reasons, but how many people go hunting every day? How many people are professional athletes and just go on hikes all day with these dogs? Most of the time, somebody has got 17 kids, or feels like that, or other people just work all the time, and that dog stays in that apartment. And usually this reverts that dog back to all these health issues that start with, as well as boredom, which we all know the physical attributes that can, as well as on us, but dogs, as well as acting out, just tearing up the house, being aggressive to other people, and I guess jumping up on you as soon as you get home. We all like that. Bill Nye the Science Guy compared pure breeding, oddly enough, to marrying only those in your social status or within your race. In a Big Think Big Think interview, he said, if you get a Dachshund and a Great Dane and you put them together, all you get is a dog. In the same way, if you get a Papua New Guinean and a Swedish person, all you're going to get is a human. If you get if a Japanese woman jumps an African guy, all you get is a human. There's nothing new species. There's nothing new. It's just the way that evolution goes. This is in reference to his book. And there's a lesson to learn by that. There's no such thing as race, and we're all just one species. And this is the way that evolution is going. As backed up by what we tried to do and how it failed, we should fix it. So go to your local shelter when you decide to get a dog, or if you already have one. There's no shame in it. We all love the dogs that we already have, and just don't worry about the breed. Don't worry about anything that you may or may not have already believed. Just worry about getting a healthy, happy dog. And I promise, any dog at the shelter is 100% dog. So, thank you.